Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. There are major developments in the clerical sex abuse story that spans several continents, and we have comprehensive coverage tonight. Here's the latest. First, another high-ranking church leader, Australian Archbishop Philip Wilson, has resigned. This follows the news from last Saturday when Pope Francis accepted the resignation of ex-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick from the College of Cardinals. And also tonight, a Pennsylvania grand jury is accusing 300 people from several dioceses of abuse wrongdoing. Let's begin our coverage with the latest developments on the clergy resignations. Former Cardinal McCarrick and Archbishop Wilson. Currents News' Michelle Powers has that report.
And of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Once one of the United States' most prominent Catholic leaders and a force in American politics, Theodore McCarrick is no longer Your Eminence.
McCarrick is no longer a cardinal. What this means is that no matter how important your position, no matter how prestigious, when it comes to sex abuse, you are going to be held accountable.
Greg Burke, the director of the Holy See press office, said the historic move came after McCarrick wrote a letter to Pope Francis last weekend, offering to step down. This marks the first time a prince of the church has ever resigned from the College of Cardinals after sexual abuse accusations.
Pope Francis has accepted this resignation. The Pope has also asked the Cardinal to live a life of prayer and penance, and also not to exercise any public ministry as a priest until there's actually a church trial.
Several months ago, the New York Archdiocese investigated allegations against McCarrick involving the abuse of a teenager and found them to be credible. The 88-year-old prelate said then, "While I have absolutely no recollection of this reported abuse and believe in my innocence, I am sorry for the pain the person who brought the charges has gone through, as well as for the scandal such charges cause our people."
Peace be with you.
In the week since the allegations were made public, others have come forward to say McCarrick sexually abused them. The priest was also accused 3 times of sexual misconduct with adults while he served as a bishop in both the neighboring dioceses of Metuchen and Newark. 2 of those allegations resulted in settlements. Many bishops in the United States are pleased with his resignation, saying it's a step forward, but more work still needs to be done before the pledge of zero tolerance is fulfilled. Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, the president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, praised the Holy Father. "I thank the Holy Father for his leadership in taking this important step. It reflects the priority the Holy Father places on the need for protection and care for all our people and the way failures in this area affect the life of the Church in the United States."
How do you feel about this going?
As quickly as this morning, Pope Francis accepted yet another resignation, this time from Australian Archbishop Philip Wilson, now the world's most senior Catholic cleric to be found guilty of covering up child sex abuse. Wilson was convicted in May of failing to report to police the abuse of 2 altar boys by a pedophile priest in the late 1970s. Michelle Powers, Currents News.
Now to talk about all these developments, I am joined by Father Gerald Murray, pastor of Manhattan's Holy Family Church. He frequently appears on radio and television offering expert commentary on church news, and the national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. Gentlemen, thank you. I can't think of 2 better people to discuss these issues with. Christopher, I want to begin with you. The bishops of the United States say that McCarrick's resignation is a step forward, but there's so much more to be done. So much more. Your thoughts?
Well, Liz, you're right. I think what we're going to see in the coming months now is internally, who knew about this? Which bishops perhaps covered up about this? You know, there were a range of bishops that were ordained by McCarrick. By the time he retired, he had ordained more priests than any bishop in this country. So many people in his orbit. So I think we're going to see some self-scrutiny and some examination of perhaps the mechanisms of perhaps a larger cover-up here.
Father Murray, your thoughts on that?
Yes, we're going to have to look forward, to see how things are going to change, but we still haven't done the full inquest on this whole matter. And by that I mean, we have to look at what happened, how many victims there were. We have to look at how these complaints were handled. There's some very serious questions about the payoffs that were made to 2 victims by the diocese in New Jersey, Newark, Metuchen, and also Trenton. And why the Washington Archdiocese was never notified of these payoffs. There are lots of questions that have to be asked. As far as I can determined when Cardinal McCarrick, now Archbishop McCarrick, when he resigned from the College of Cardinals, he's virtually admitting he's guilty. And for me, that's only a first step. He really has to come forward and come clean. He has to apologize to his victims. He has to pay any money he has toward the victims and toward those dioceses. Lots of things need to happen, because we can't just say, well, it's a sad event, let's look forward and forget the past. We have to know what happened, how it happened, why it happened.
Obviously, there are so many layers, and I really hope we can touch upon as many. Let's focus now on survivors, on the victims. Father Murray, the Washington Archdiocese issued a statement pointing to the fact that by coming forward now with these abuse allegations, survivors are showing a confidence in the church to take that their church is taking this more seriously. Do you agree?
I do, and we should recall that the reason Cardinal McCarrick, now Archbishop McCarrick, came into the forefront on this matter was because Cardinal Dolan in New York established more or less a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, where he said anybody who's been abused by a priest in the past, come forward, we'll hear your complaint, we'll evaluate it, and if it's found credible, we'll give you a monetary payout. And that's a good thing. That resulted in this. I think every diocese in America should do this now. And in fact, I think the Vatican should go beyond that, should require that it be done. And they should also now have a mechanism for when these charges come up regarding bishops, that they're not simply going to fall through the cracks because Cardinal McCarrick, for whatever reason, he was able to pursue a life of many evil acts, and no one stopped him. And we can't have that happening in the future.
Christopher, we're talking about the highest levels of clericism. It's hard to overestimate McCarrick's role in the U.S. Church. Now, what does it mean that someone of his stature is no longer a cardinal and facing a Vatican trial?
Well, I think if we think back over the 90s and the early 2000s, the presence in the American Church of Cardinal McCarrick was enormous, not just internally, but externally. This is an individual that was friends with presidents and politicians, and rock stars like Bono. I mean, he was an outsized figure. And so for him to sort of, in a sense, have such a public downfall, I think that Catholics and just the general public are going to have to reckon with this, and it will be a difficult period of recovery. That being said, the fact that someone of such power can be brought down, I think, is a step forward, but only that. Last week, Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston said we need more than apologies in handling sex abuse in the church. And so I think the next few months will be this, what are these next steps that go beyond apologies?
Father Murray, you have strong thoughts on that.
Sure, no, I agree with Christopher, and I recall when in 2002, after the Boston scandals first got revealed, the American bishops met, they issued their famous Dallas Charter, but the president of the Bishops' Conference at the time said, if there are any bishops here present who have done these crimes or done these evil things, please turn yourselves in. No one turned themselves in. So therefore, Cardinal McCarrick, who is accused credibly of having abused people right from the beginning of his priestly life, he was reckless because he accepted promotion to the episcopate, to becoming a cardinal, to representing the church in foreign countries, relations in the U.S. with important people, knowing that his background could be exposed at any moment and therefore disillusion people. He was a man who had this maniacal grip on power over people. He used it for evil, and he exposed the church to what we now have, which is looking at us saying, are you people serious? You promote a man to cardinal, and this is what he's done, and no one knew about it or claims they didn't. This is a serious problem, has to be dealt with.
Where does all of this leave the Pope's pledge of zero tolerance for abuse?
Well, I think back to when Pope Francis was here in this country in 2015, and he said, God weeps at abuse, and then he went on to say abuse cannot be kept secret. So we knew that Pope Francis was elected on a reform mandate. If sex abuse reform was one of those issues that he had to deal with, it has now become the issue. And I think the credibility of his papacy depends on if he can get this right. Let's not forget, globally, this is an issue. In Chile, he's continuing to suffer from the fallout of the abuse scandal down there. Since he visited in January, he's accepted the resignations of a handful of bishops, but all of the country's bishops, 33, have offered their resignation. So they're still, in a sense, at the Vatican trying to wrap their minds around the Chile situation. Now we have a new crisis here in the U.S. Let's not forget the Pope is going to Ireland in August, where the abuse situation there will loom large. So this is the issue for this Pope.
What more can you do?
No, it is, and it's not an issue any of us would choose to put forefront, except for the fact that we have to. You know, Christian charity demands justice, and it demands love be shown to those who've been victimized by the ones who are supposed to be preaching Christian love. Now, in the Chile situation, I'm glad you brought that up. The Pope had been misinformed, he said, about what was going on there. He sent an investigator who was a very respected archbishop from Malta. That bishop produced a more than 10,000-page dossier of testimony about not only sexual abuse, but also abuse of power. In other words, people in the ecclesiastical hierarchy were using their power to suppress evidence and discourage people coming forward. I think the Pope has to do the same thing here. He's got to send an investigator, and they have to look at where power has been abused in the church, meaning where bishops who are not accountable to anybody make payouts, tell victims you have to be quiet. And we have to also look at another problem, which is this is not just of minors. This is sexual abuse of employees, priests, seminarians who are adults, and some bishops, such as McCarrick, use their authority over them for evil purposes. Is he the only case? I hope he is, but we got to find out.
While I consider both of you experts in your vocations, I know you don't have crystal balls. So I will pose this question to you and you answer the best as you can. What can we expect in the weeks and months ahead, Father, just with you
Well,
first?
I'm not sure how Rome is going to react because, of course, this is a shock to the Pope and to others that a cardinal would be doing anything like this. But I expect action from there, and I certainly think on the national level, and thank God for the free press, bishops who have been involved in payoffs or knowing of McCarrick's perfidy and did nothing, they're going to be asked questions. And those are legitimate questions. You know, if you had a culture of abuse at IBM, would anybody be angry if the IBM board said, hey, look, give us the answers or you're out? And that if you're innocent, you're happy to talk. If you're guilty, you got to talk. And that's the kind of spirit we need here.
Christopher, final words.
I think you're right, and beyond just the cultural shift, I think we're going to see a move to amend the Dallas Charter, perhaps, so that bishops can be held accountable. Of course, they should be accountable under canon law as it is, but specifically in the U.S., I think that's a very necessary first step, but only a small one.
Father Murray, Christopher, thank you so much for your candor, insight, and perspective. I really appreciate you joining me. Moving on now to other developments in the sexual abuse crisis. Pennsylvania Supreme Court has ordered that a grand jury report regarding sex abuse in 6 of the state's dioceses be released. In the ruling, the court wrote about what the grand jury did, specifically finding that more than 300 people identified by name committed criminal and/or morally reprehensible conduct. The court is ordering the names be temporarily redacted. The report could be made public as soon as August 8th. In Chile, the main prosecutor investigating sex abuse is accusing the church of destroying evidence. Emiliano Arias will be questioning Cardinal Ricardo Ezadi, the Archbishop of Santiago, next month in the country's capital. Arias has said there is a culture of concealment within the Chilean church. The cardinal is scheduled to be questioned on August 21st. And in Honduras, more disturbing abuse accusations are surfacing. Nearly 50 seminarians have protested against what they say is a widespread pattern of homosexuality in a major seminary in the country's capital, Tegucigalpa. Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Mariaga is the Archbishop of Tegucigalpa. He's also one of the Pope's closest advisors. He has not responded publicly to the seminarians' allegations. Still ahead on Currents News, details on the important steps the Brooklyn Diocese takes to prevent sex abuse. And I'll speak with Deacon Phil Franco, a victim of clergy sexual abuse himself. He weighs in on new developments in the crisis, and he talks about what the church is doing to heal the wounds of abuse. When the Boston sex abuse crisis erupted in the early 2000s, the U.S. bishops took action to fight the scandal. They wrote the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People in 2002. The document is a comprehensive set of procedures for addressing allegations of sexual abuse of minors by Catholic clergy. The Charter includes guidelines for reconciliation, for healing, accountability, and prevention of future acts of abuse. It was revised 3 times, the latest update this year. In the Brooklyn Diocese, there are many important measures in place to prevent abuse. The Office of Victim Assistance helps individuals who come forward with allegations of abuse. The office provides counseling, referrals for therapy, and other resources. Every employee of the diocese, including students, undergo mandatory training to prevent and identify abuse. Bishop DiMarzio meets with survivors and listens to their requests, and the diocese holds a yearly Mass of Hope and Healing, which they suggested. Brooklyn Deacon Phil Franco is a survivor of clerical sex abuse. A priest close to his family attacked him. Today, Deacon Phil works with the Diocese Office of Victim Assistance, and he joins us now. Deacon, first of all, thank you so much for the courage to share your story and for making time for us today.
Thank you for having me.
What was your reaction to the news that Theodore McCarrick was being held accountable for his actions?
Well, I can't speak for all victims, but for me personally, I think it was a combination of, I was very happy that he was finally being held accountable, which is, the accountability is well deserved. On the other hand, there's a frustration there that I did not feel with some other stories because of his level of authority, his level of power, his direct involvement really in the Dallas Charter in 2002. And a little bit of frustration in the sense that it took so long.
Is this frustration for you ongoing with the process? Have you found any encouragement at all as to what's being done to prevent this?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's very encouraging to see that for the first time since 1927, a cardinal has been completely stripped of his title. He is no longer a member of the College of Cardinals. Now, whether or not that came from his decision or the Pope requesting it is to a certain extent irrelevant. The fact of the matter is he lost that title, and he's been asked to live a life of prayer and penance by the Pope. And when the Pope asks, that's more like a demand. So that's a good thing. And I'm glad that people are not being silent anymore, and I think that's a positive thing.
You're not being silent, and for that we appreciate it because you help us get the story out. Do we not focus enough on the victim? How have you been able to endure and survive?
Well, I think a big reason for me being able to endure and survive, and I see the difference. There's many different victims who unfortunately have not been able to. I think for me it's prayer, faith, family, friends, many good priests who have been wonderful guides in this whole terrible situation. But I think when you combine those things, the prayer, family and friends, when you combine that is what has helped you go on. It never goes away, but it's something that you can endure.
And Deacon, have you had an opportunity to speak with other survivors? I know in many of these cases, knowing that you're not alone helps the healing.
Yes, I've had a number of opportunities thanks to the Diocese of Brooklyn and the Victims Assistance Committee and the different aspects of diocesan ministry. I've had a number of opportunities. To this day, people that I've known sometimes for many years will come to me and say that, I never told you this, but I'm a victim also. Or they will come to me as total strangers and say, I saw you in the tablet, or I saw you on Currents, or at the Healing Mass, and I want to talk to you about my story. So I've had the opportunity to meet many others, and also to share their story is helpful for both. It's mutually beneficial.
We now are seeing people that paint the priesthood with a broad brush, and you and I have discussed the fact that you can't do that. Is there a mistrust in your heart for all priests?
Absolutely not. I think quite the opposite. I think one of the reasons, as I suggested, one of the reasons that I have been able to survive and endure this difficult situation are the many great priests who, in a way, really raised me. I grew up without a dad, and priests were essential in my upbringing, and some of them were phenomenal, and I still keep in touch with today. I think of my childhood pastor, who was instrumental in my involvement in the church, and priests after that at the parish. So I think it's a tremendous mistake to paint with a broad brush.
Really quickly, how can the church better address the sex abuse crisis?
Transparency, complete and total transparency, not protecting people regardless of their rank, not being silent regardless of their fear of perhaps hurting their career. And I hate even to use the term career, but some view the priesthood as a career, or the episcopacy. Transparency is the answer.
Deacon Franco, my heart opens up to you. I thank you so much for your courage and for joining me.
Thank you.
I look forward to speaking with you a lot more
in the future. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The Diocese of Brooklyn has a toll-free and confidential sexual abuse reporting line. That number is 634-4499. And for more information, you can also go to the Diocese of Brooklyn's website, dioceseofbrooklyn.org, and click on Protecting Our Children. When Pope Francis goes to Ireland next month for the World Meeting of Families, Cardinal Kevin Farrell hopes the Holy Father will help heal sex abuse wounds that have caused that country to suffer.
And suffered at the hands of the church also. So many cases of abuse, both sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. Our hearts go out to all the victims of abuse.
Cardinal Farrell is one of the organizers of the families meeting. The church is marking the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. At the Vatican, the Pope said migrants are among the most vulnerable to the crime.
È responsabilità di tutti denunciare le ingiustizie e contrastare con fermezza questo vergognoso crimine.
The pontiff also urged his audience not to throw away food because leftovers could feed the world's hungry. Still to come on Currents News, thousands rally in defense of the Catholic Church under fire in Nicaragua. Plus, the deadly wildfires in California are at historic levels. We'll be right back. At least 6 people have died and many are still missing as firefighters continue battling the wildfires throughout California. Fire officials say a major fire has reached historic levels. Mary Maloney has the latest.
Our biggest fear our whole life living here was that a fire would get into this canyon and roar up the canyon and take our house out. And so Thursday night about 7 o'clock, our worst nightmare came true. And wow, this is really hard to see.
Firefighters in California working around the clock to maintain their control lines and battling spot fires to keep them from spreading.
It's hard to articulate, but our community just wants to convey their thanks and respect.
On Monday, authorities honoring Captain Brian Hughes, a firefighter who died battling the Ferguson fire. For those who were lucky, a positive outlook.
It's bringing people very close together, the people who still have are helping the people who don't, and I'm very lucky. It's luck. I can't describe anything else.
Yeah. But for many families...
Wow, it's all gone.
Authorities over the weekend gaining some control on the Carr fire, which has burned about 100,000 acres so far.
We're feeling a lot more optimistic today as we are starting to gain some ground rather than being in the defensive mode on this fire all the time.
According to CAL FIRE, the Carr fire is now the 9th most destructive in the history of California, having burned over 960 structures. Officials are on guard as they keep an eye out for wind gusts and dry conditions that persist, posing a threat to their progress. Mary Maloney, Currents News.
Tens of thousands rallied in Nicaragua over the weekend in defense of the Catholic Church. The country has been riddled with violence for months now, protesting the President Daniel Ortega's regime. But this time, people took to the streets to show their support for Catholic bishops as the prelates have suffered vicious attacks at the hands of government forces. CBS's longtime CEO, Les Moonves, has been accused of sexual harassment. The company's board of directors has discussed the allegations, which will be investigated by a special committee. Moonves said that decades ago, there were times when he, quote, may have made some women uncomfortable by making advances. Robert Wilkie is the new Veterans Affairs Secretary sworn in today. One of his first acts on the job, getting veterans access to the treatment they have earned. The VA department has been riddled with highly publicized political turmoil and a moral crisis. The Justice Department is creating a religious liberty task force. Attorney General Jeff Sessions made the announcement this morning.
The task force will help the department fully implement our religious liberty guidance by ensuring that all Justice Department components, and we got a lot of components around the country, are upholding that guidance.
Sessions said the task force will help create policy and develop court cases to ensure religious liberty. Before we go, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that this has been a heavy day of news coverage of the sex abuse crisis. The details can be difficult to hear, but as journalists, we have a duty to cover the news accurately and fairly, and that is what we will continue to do as we report on these stories. I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you so much for watching, because we are putting your faith in the news. I hope to see you again next time.